Hey, hey, and welcome to Apotelesmatics. This your host Justin here, and this is a show that goes over the astrology from the monthly from the perspective of that mighty sun, and weekly from that good old moon. But this in today's episode, we're going to give the sun the spotlight and go over the astrology of September 2026. Now, I will say September is a little bit of a break when I was looking over it. And when I do go over this, it may not sound like it. But considering that of all the shenanigans that July brought and all the eclipse nonsense that August had to present, this will be somewhat of a break. I think that what'll be is the kind of adjusting after all of the changes that may have happened during that period of time, the sort of settling of the debris in a sense. So that's sort of what September is bringing. We got Venus and Mercury that are doing this. They're going to be doing a lot of like teaming up here. They're going to be ingressing into signs on the 10th, the same day as the new moon. We're going to be entering into Libra season here soon, so that's going to be something. I got some Libras to reach out to. We have the full moon in Aries that's going to be happening. Mars is going to be making an ingress into Leo. That's going to be a little tricky. And then considering the sun just moved. And then we have Mercury. Mercury's zipping along, but it's going to be getting ready to slow down here soon. Mercury's going to be ingressing into Scorpio. So those will be sort of the main thing, or not sort of, the main things that we're going to be talking about in this video today. Now, before we jump into these things, if you want to support the work that I'm doing further, there's a couple ways to do that. Down in the description box, there is a link to book a consultation with me. My email's down there if you have any questions about that. And there's also a link for my Patreon page where I do some monthly videos, talk about the most auspicious dates, and I have some other projects that I'm going to be rolling out here shortly. So some things to look forward to that. But yeah, if that's something you're interested in, definitely go avail yourself of that. But let me go ahead just to give you, if you're new here, if you're watching the video version, I'm gonna bring up the calendar for the month, go over the different ingresses and events that are going to be happening, and then I'll break down each of the events and pull up the charts for them individually and kind of break them down a little bit further. And then if you're just listening to this in the audio version, then I'll try to describe things as best as possible there. But let me go ahead and pull up the calendar for September here and get myself situated. There we go. Now, like I said, on the 10th here, for those of you who are watching here, we got the calendar. There's Venus. But on the 10th, speaking of Venus, Venus is going to ingress into Scorpio, and Mercury is going to ingress into Libra on the same day. We have a pretty busy one on the 10th, so that would be one that I would mark your calendars with, as far as like a very kind of active time. And then on that same day, we're also going to have a new moon that's going to happen in Virgo as well. Now, I'm not going to go over the new moon in too much detail. I'll be going over that when I'll talk about that in the weekly episode when I go over the lunar shenanigans. So again, if you want to check that out, they have a playlist tab for both of the monthly and for the weekly ones there. So that's going to be happening on the 10th, jam packed. And then if it's a little quiet for a while, we'll have just like mainly some moon things that'll be going on. And then on the 22nd, we'll enter into Libra season, which that'll be exciting. All the Libras will be celebrating. And then on the 26th, we'll have the full moon that's going to be happening in Aries. On the 27th of September, that's where we get a little bit. Mars is going to ingress into Leo. And that one's going to be of a bit of a mixed bag, mainly on the because of the condition of the sun, which again, we'll navigate more. And then lastly, we'll have Mercury that's going to ingress into Scorpio. And that'll happen at the end of the month on the 30th of September. So again, not too much going on, but I still think it's going to be some impact, some things that are still going to be happening, maybe some residual things that happen from this eclipse time here. So now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, let me go ahead and pull up the actual chart itself, and then we'll go over them one at a time. Now, we're going to start with start with the moon, or excuse me, with Venus entering into Scorpio. That's going to happen on the 10th of September at around 1:06 Pacific time. Now, when we're looking at the lay of the land here, let me go ahead and get my handy dandy drawer up here. Here's Venus at 0 degrees of Scorpio. So first thing that you're going to want to do in your personal charts, you're going to want to look to see, is Venus a time lord that's activated for you this year? So or during this during a period of time, to see where how Venus is aspecting your other planets, especially those if you have any in the solid signs. That's going to be Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo. Venus is going to be working more actively with those placements. So those would be ones. The hardest one I would say of that would probably be depending on if it's malefics or not. But the opposition, if you have any things in Taurus, that one may be a bit more intense. Or just because Venus is in opposition, it's not going to be maybe as benefic, or there may be some reversals in regards to maybe any of the beneficence that it brings from friends, from women, things along those lines. The kind of Venus topics. Now, when you when we think about this kind of in a more mundane sense, Venus itself, this is a bit better for Venus in the sense because Venus has been under some hard conditions. While Venus was in its domicile, it was getting all disrespected by Saturn and by Mars here. Saturn was in opposition to Venus. Mars was overcoming Venus. So this is a bit of a break. So, interestingly enough for Venus, it's opposite one of its home signs here. So, that's a bit meh. But overall, Venus is getting a bit more support. Venus or Jupiter now is overcoming Venus by square. So that's bringing a bit more positivity in the topics around Venus. When you think of things like Venus, I think of like beauty, things around desire, love. So we could see where there's maybe some more support in what we want, maybe in terms of maybe there's something you've been kind of longing for or something along those lines. And there's an opening that's coming up from there, especially let's say if you have just for example, if you have Jupiter overcoming your natal Venus placement, you may notice some support in regards to that, again, to look at it as a personal regard. But in the topics, this is a bit more support for the top regards to women and all those other topics that deal with Venus. There's a bit more support in that. It's got good configuration with its domicile lord Mars. At least Mars views Venus in a harmonious way and not in a harmful way like it was with that square. So this is nice. Again, it's less forceful of Mars, and Mars is being more, okay, let's okay, Venus asked for this, let's get things into action, let's get motivated. So you could see maybe where there are maybe prominent women in your life that are trying to move some things along. Maybe there has been a bit of a harsh period. Maybe they've been going through some harder transits. This could be a girlfriend. This could be a wife. This could be a friend who's a girl or a woman, something along those lines. And now finally kind of catching a break here, trying to move some things along here. But the one minus with this one, Venus isn't quite out of the woods because because of its domicile lord Mars. Of course, Mars is not in the best conditions right now. Mars is in the sign of its depression and Cancer. It's overcome by Saturn here, so it's got a lot of things that are dampening that force. That's not able to. Mars is still maybe running into some roadblocks. It's still, I still think that it's not to say that someone shouldn't try to continue something, but it's just know that there may be some roadblocks along the way. Maybe you're trying to get married, but there's a lot of red tape that's going on. Maybe there's just been some events that have happened, maybe some things along those lines. So, this is again, it's a bit of a mixed bag for Venus, but I like at least that Venus has some support so that even if things do happen to maybe take a pause or run into some kind of hindrance or something like that, that I would say, there could be one where you can get some help, maybe ask for help, find some additional resources. It may not be a whole bunch, but hey, sometimes we got to take what we can get and try to make that work depending on the situations that are going on, depending on how the times are handling to us or handing off to us. So just some things I would say to think about with Venus. Venus will have a bit of a better time once it's in its bounds here. So Venus has a little bit of bounds in Scorpio, and once it gets into Jupiter's bounds, that's would be, those are the bounds of the benefics. But starting off here, this one's a bit of a bit of a mixed one here, just because it's one of Mars. It's a bounds of Mars. Again, Mars is not in the best shape right now, so just some things to think about when we're thinking about topics around Venus. Now let's talk about Mercury next, because again, on the same day at about 9:20 Pacific time, and I'm doing everything in 24-hour time, by the way, and I have it all up top here, so you'll be able to tell the difference. But then we have Mercury that's going to ingress into Libra on at about, but I said about 9:20 Pacific time. Now, when we think about this, similar to how we were looking at the Scorpio parts and looking to see what topics Scorpio is involved with. So let's say, for example, when we were talking about with that Venus, someone with Libra rising would Venus may be doing something with finances, hopefully bringing in some positive things, especially if you happen to have a night chart. That'd be something that I would tune in, that I would pay attention to. But you want to look to see, instead of the fixed placement, you want to look at the cardinal placements. That's going to be Libra, Capricorn, Aries, and Cancer. Any planets that are going through those placements, if you have any time lords that are activated, or if Mercury is a time lord, those placements are going to be working more actively. The cardinal placements, especially if they are activated, they're getting beat up right now. Like I said, the cardinal signs is not a fun place to be right now with Saturn and Mars, especially in the hardest placements would be Cancer and in Libra. Those two, just because of how they're positioned. Capricorn would be would be the close third, and then that'd be a mix with Aries. But we're all competing to see who has having the harder time. you know, so this would be a very busy one. This is something, if you do notice a lot of activity, mark this. Kind of get kind of oriented with this. With Mercury entering into the first place, let's say for someone with Libra rising, maybe you're thinking around things around the body. Maybe you're thinking about the direction that you're taking. Mars is going through your 10th place. We're seeing, are there people that are interfering with that? With Saturn going through your 7th place, maybe there have been some hindrances. Maybe you're thinking about getting married with Saturn going there. That just depends on what's going on. But we're thinking about life directions here. All the angles would be activated during that time. So that would be especially pivotal if you have your rising signs in the cardinal placements as well. So take note of that as well. And then people in your life who happen to have placements in the cardinal signs, you can kind of get an idea of why. If you notice, like, oh, I'm going just fine through this period, what's going on with you? It makes a difference. Then some people who are going to have similar periods, what a day and a night chart can make a difference. So just something to think about with that one. Now, on a more mundane sense, the topics around Mercury are going to be harsh. We're thinking about, when we think of Mercury, just kind of on like the essence of it. You think of Mercury dealing with things around like law, or maybe around customs or fidelity, and so we may see maybe some things happening with some legal matters coming up there. Maybe there's some abrupt changes that happen in loyalties. Maybe we see some loyalty shifts or something along those lines, some sort of shifting that's going on there, because the cardinal signs are initiators. There's something, that's a lot of things that are potentially starting up here. And another kind of minus with this is that Mercury is in aversion to its domicile lord, Venus. And so aversions usually can create these enmities, these factualisms. These can, a lot of tension. So that would be something to monitor that in your home space, monitor that in your workspace, monitor that in your city space, and see how those things, to see to what degree how these things can translate. I remember when I'm recording this, the moon just moved out of Libra, but I remember talking about the moon in Libra being a hard time because of this stuff. And man, it was a lot going on especially in the city. Gosh, so just something to tune into. Just kind of watch these. Be aware of communication styles of with Mars being there, of just kind of saying things without thinking, just kind of off the hip, just sort of just really just being glib and even being rash, aggressive. That would be something that I would, letting the mind being overcome by wanting to maybe be in the dominant position and things along those lines, to have some sort of control, to not feel like someone is restraining you or something along those lines. So just be aware of that. Saturn being there, being opposed to Mercury, just looking at ways of that maybe, hmm, different ways that maybe people are trying to keep us in the dark, even potentially, or, and then I say us, like, maybe you have friends who are doing some things, and it's not to create a paranoia, but watch how people move, just kind of observe. Saturn is one that can give this false appearances to things. This is saying one thing and me and doing another. That's what this gives me here. It's not, and now, and keep in mind, this isn't, I'm just not all doom. We do got Jupiter in the mix, and even though Jupiter's a bit diminished with it being co-present with the descending node, it's still something. We still, Jupiter is coming in, bringing in some will, bringing in some ways to bring in some positive opinions. It's like, okay, these are the times that we're working with. How can I move accordingly? How can I best work with what's being presented with me right now, depending on the situation that you're in? Maybe you're thinking about some things with your health with Mercury now, like I said, entering into Libra. Maybe you have this in the fourth place. You're thinking about maybe moving. You're thinking about your city. Maybe there's something going on with your siblings with it. Maybe it's in your third place. So again, just looking to see what is happening personally, and again, just to kind of know that there are a lot of shifts that are going on right now. So just to keep note of that. I think that's all I want to say about that one. Last thing that I'll talk about here, I'll bring up the new moon just briefly here, just for your information. That's going to happen at about 2027 Pacific time, and it happens at 18 degrees and 25 minutes of Virgo. Now, what I like about this one here is that it is in the bounds of Jupiter, so that's really good. That brings a little bit of positivity there. It's not configured to Mercury, which I'm not entirely crazy about, but that's just a little minus. But I think that with the times, it's configured to Venus, so that's really good. It's averse to Saturn, so that's nice. It's got more going for it than not. And again, I'll go more into this on the lunar shenanigans, so that's something that you want to check out. I'll break that down a bit more, but overall, we'll see. Well, we'll see. Just from a baseline here at a glance, not an interesting start, I will say. I'm not even gonna say not a bad start, because we're starting off with some changes. So just know that this is how, we had those ingresses, and then the month starts. So it's like, we're gonna got some adapting to do, but it's gonna be a minute before the next shift that's gonna be happening. And let's go ahead and talk about that ingress, which is going to be the sun ingressing into Libra. And for years with your sun in Libra, and if you're watching the video version or if you're listening to the audio version, I'm doing a little dance right now for you Libra suns. It's your birthday. We're gonna party all around. And take some time, Libras. Really, take some time. I had to tell a Leo not too long ago that to take the whole month. I was like, what do you mean you feel weird taking about just the day? Libra, take the month. and and celebrate, live it up, do some good things, evaluate what's been going on for you for the year, and what's to come. This would be a great time. This is a little shameless plug here, book a reading and book a consultation, just to see what's going on for you for the year, see where things are at, what's in the times. But when we look at now, let's get into the talk about the sun. The sun is going to ingress into Libra. Here's the sun at about 17:05 Pacific time on the 22nd, if I didn't mention that. Now, I don't want to get too pumped up about the sun, because like I said, Libra is not entirely the place to be right now when we're talking about as far as domiciles go, on just by itself, because one, this is where the sun finds itself in its depression now. So now you got Saturn sad, Mars is sad, the sun's sad, and so you got a lot of pressure that's coming on there, a lot of pressure on the light, a lot of pressure on the you think of the sun as that sense of eminence, of rank, those in kind of celebrity or in prominence and things like that. And so where you can maybe see is that maybe a lot more pressure on maybe those in prominence. And this doesn't have to be just be in like government. This could be on a municipal level. This could be in a company level. This could be in a household level. Maybe the one in charge is kind of under fire. Maybe there's something that's going on. Maybe with Saturn here, we're opposed to this thing. Or this could even be one thing I was thinking about with the sun. This could be maybe even someone trying to come into prominence. There's Jupiter here trying to bring some support with this, trying to come into some kind of prominence, but being met with obstacles. Being the with Saturn being, you think about older people, Saturn trying to repress any sort of new fresh light to come in. That could be something that could be some going on there. Or even Mars, because Mars is still overcoming the sun for a little period of time. Thankfully, not for too long, but still, we're going to have this little pocket of time where those topics around the sun are going to be under a lot of pressure. And this is one where the sun is already not doing too great. So this would be one where I would just kind of monitor, even just being aware of, when I think of the sun as light, what's being revealed. This can give me, say, like more of the kind of martial things are coming to light, more of the Saturnian things are coming to light, things that are, again, like military matters, or things that sudden things happening in public or something along those lines. Or with Saturn, you think of chronic things, old things, both violent, both having in different ways, and trying to bring about this, they bring about the destruction of things. And so this would just be a time where make sure to just take care of oneself. I think with Jupiter there, finding ways to how to finding ways to stay in good opinion. I find, especially, say, for example, let's say on a simple, let's say you're upset with like how a company's being you're being run. So this could be, instead of being of just talking about the problem, okay, let me try to, maybe there's a way for me to come into role so that I can fix the problem. So that maybe I need to get into a bit more of authority, gain a bit more rank. Think about it with Jupiter here. How can I get in a better position to make best of this situation based on what this it is being revealed to me? You think of the sun as just that, again, on that base level, just light, just shining light on things. And so the light is kind of, again, the light's looking a little dim, and I think that it's not to be in a place where I think of just being in a negative opinion, or to be in an opinion that is delusional, or or is going to be one where you're in where the negative maybe side of that would be to be that just kind of wishful thinking that it'll just, maybe if I just look away, that it'll just go away, or something like that, if I don't do anything. Sometimes you got to do those things. You have to, the martial thing, you're forced into a corner. You're forced to react. It forces you to do something. Maybe that's a bit out of character, that may not be as bright as you would like. That may be a less dimmer side of one's character. But one two we get, and it's getting into to tricky territory here. As the sun may, this could bring up a lot of thoughts and things. And the with Venus too, it's Venus is in aversion to the sun is in aversion to its domicile, Lord Venus. So again, I think this is a real hot pot for just getting into arguments, for unnecessary separations, for those who are allies to turn into enemies because of maybe some other stressors that are going on. And that may be something to recognize too, to acknowledge when we're going through something, and being able to talk about that in a way where we're not, again, maybe turning someone into the enemy, but where we're seeing that they're, maybe it's like, hey, I need to kind of process some things, but I'll be ready to talk about this here soon. It has nothing to do with you. It's some outside things. Or if there's something that is maybe in between someone, maybe there's an uncomfortable conversation that needs to be had. Maybe there's a light, like with the sun being here, light that needs to be shined on something that has been troublesome for a while, so that maybe even be something to think about, depending on what's going on personally, depending on I'll be curious to see what again, those in power, what kind of positions they're kind of put into, because again, this is going to be a particularly tough time for topics around that. So Just some things to just some things to think about on that one. Then we get to the get to the as he casually moves on. Then we get to the full moon that's going to happen on the 26th at about 9:49 Pacific time. Now, this one is a bit of a tricky one, just even because it's kind of looking at a bit of a glance here. Moon's co-present with Saturn. Sun's in tough shape. Mars is gonna move soon. Soon, not soon enough. But yeah, this is a bit of a trickier full moon. It's happening in the bound. Well, the sun's in the bounds of Saturn. The moon is in the bounds of Jupiter. So that's actually kind of interesting. We'll see. There may be some. Hmm, if I had to just say something just kind of glib about it, when you think of the sun dealing with the leader and then the moon dealing with the people, where there's still some troubles, I think, with people, again, in regards to those, that's kind of like the populace and things, it's in the bounds of Jupiter. So I think there's more good, at least some kind of good trying to come out of that. I would say it would be a bit harsher for those that are not, but that's just again just a quick glance at that. May see some, like you could see where this would be like rebellions or some sort of strikes or some sort of, that's what I mean, when it's talking about that, where the people are hopefully, potentially getting their way, where there's some sort of justice maybe being served there. But with Mercury, that's going to be, we'll see. We shall see. But that's basically all that I would talk about with the full moon there. Let's talk about Mars. Now, Mars is going to ingress into Leo at about on the 27th of September at about 1948 Pacific time. Now, this is beware, just like we were talking about with Venus and with Mercury, you want to, and just like and with the sun, because with the sun, you want to look to see where if you got any planets in the cardinal placements, and with Mars, any planets in the solid signs. That's going to be, let me circle those there, Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus. Mars is going to be working more personally with those charts, and this would be particularly hard if you have, without with all other things considered, if you have a day chart. So that would be something to note. I have a bunch of Leo stuff and Jupiter Saturn is activated, so I'm gonna keep an eye on that. So and that's something where you can go and know. And and I should be mentioning too. Let me backtrack. I should be mentioning this with Venus. I know I'm going like all the way back. With Venus in Scorpio. Venus is going to be in Scorpio for a while because it's going to be retrograde, kind of back and forth there. Venus is, let me see. Venus will be in Scorpio from from September 10th to about October 25th. And then it's going to move back into Libra. And then it'll ingress back into Scorpio on the 4th and then finally leave on the 4th of December and then finally leave Scorpio on the 7th of January. So Venus is going to have an extended time in the Libra and Scorpio portions of our charts. So get familiar with those placements, especially when we get into that next month. So yeah, for example here, that would be if you happen to have what would this rising be? Taurus rising. This would be maybe some things in regards to maybe around health, and then things maybe around marriage or travel, things along those lines, friendships, things like that. Enemies with the Libra portion of the charts there. So something to tune into on that one. When we talk about, let me go to Mercury real quick. My apologies for this. I should have caught that earlier. Now with with Mercury, Mercury is going to be in Libra from the 10th of September to the 30th of September. So while monitor, that'll be the worst, that'll be the harshest of it for Mercury. So just something to tune into there during that period of time. Now for the sun is going to be in Libra from the 22nd until the of September to the 23rd of October. So just something to tune into there if you have any things around those cardinal placements. Now let's get back to Mars. Now that we've gotten caught up with everybody and how everybody's moving. Mars is going to ingress, like I said, on the 27th, and it'll be in Virgo, in Leo until the 25th of November. Now Mars is going to this is where things start getting a little bit tricky. Because Mars, where things are right fine right now, once we start getting into next month, Mars is going to start slowing down. The sun's going to start getting closer to that overcoming square with Mars, especially once it ingresses into Scorpio, and then we start getting to that anomalous period of Mars, and that's where things are going to be tend to be a bit rocky. I would say even more so the retrograde station more so than the direct station, but still times like this long period of time, because Mars, when it stations retrograde, it's very different than the other the traditional outer planets of Saturn and Jupiter. But I'll talk about that more once we get into that period. But Mars is going to have some times where it'll be in Leo, like I mentioned here, and then it'll let's see, and then it will enter back into Leo around the 21st of February, and then we'll enter back into Virgo on May. So Mars is going to have a huge chunks of time in the Leo and Virgo portions of our charts. So again, especially if you have day charts, get eyes on if you have any time lords that are activated in those placements, how things are configured, if they're going to be tensor, if Mars is co-present. Because like, for example, I have, like I mentioned with Jupiter and Saturn, I have Mars is going to be co-present with my Jupiter placement, and it'll be opposed my Saturn placement. So it sounds like fun times. So I'm just thinking about those things. I've been taking care. That's my first house. So I take care of things. Been taking care of things with my health, and there's some other things that I got to get figured out with I'm tabling. But at least it's on my radar, and that can be a way just at least just to get prepared for those types of things. So just something to note. Now, when we think about this in general, or just like Mars, not general, more so in like a mundane sense, Mars, this is a mixed bag for Mars. Initially, I like that Mars is with the south node or the descending node, where it's not great for Jupiter, because Jupiter, Big Papa's a benefic, and that's going to diminish the beneficence of Jupiter. The South Node's going to turn down that martial quality too. So love that. Absolutely love that. Whenever we can turn Mars down a bit, or either the benefic, or excuse me, the malefics, let's do that. And it's going to have that co-presence with Jupiter, which is helpful. It'll have that configuration. It's a bit weaker, but at least I have that configuration with Venus as well, giving Mars a bit more harmony than not, for more themes around kind of those martial things, like let's say public matters, or matters dealing with the military initially. Because there's even some things where Saturn is not even doing too much with it's more harmoniously configured now that it's in this in a trine with Saturn, or excuse me, with Mars. So that's even some goodness there. Mars is getting, which I think we could all use a bit of a Marshall break. I'm good on Mars topics. The only minus that I say with this, and this is why it's important to look at the not just the planet, but look at the domicile lord of the planet, because that's the one where the planet, where it's initially at, can indicate the beginning of the matters, and how its domicile lord is configured can indicate how things may end during that period of time, or how things come to a conclusion. Get a little tea here. Mars is making things making things nervous, but like I said, the sun's not doing too great, because that's the domicile lord for Mars and for Big Papa. So that's even something to think about too. Not just the fact that the sun is in the shape, but that's affecting Big Papa and its beneficence as well, which is already was kind of a bit kind of shaky there. So I wouldn't be surprised if there maybe things seem like they're going to be okay at first, and then there's some kind of weird reversal, some kind of things go, kind of taking a weird turn, depending on what's going on there. I'm hoping once Mercury moves out of, and even that'll be a bit tricky, but hopefully once Mercury moves out from under Saturn, that'll at least ease up a little bit. It'll be in a square with Mars, but at least it'll be its domicile lord. So that's a little bit better. Mars won't be so harsh, to planets in, let's say, in its, in that it's taken care of. It'll be like that. And actually, I should probably just go ahead. I think that's all I want to talk about with Mars. But yeah, things around like those martial topics, those troubles. Hopefully, I'm again, hopefully optimistic or cautiously optimistic. That's what I'm trying to say with this one. I'd be keep kind of eye on those kind of like public matters, just keeping situational awareness. I think while while you're out and about, whatever and whatever you're doing, if you happen to be traveling, things along those lines, just something to pay attention to. Be aware of any sort of like expect any sort of like delays or note any sort of like delays and things along those lines. Just because with Saturn opposing the Sun, there may be just some unexpected things, so just something to keep in tune, just to tune into there. Now let's get to the last one here, which is going to be Mercury. Oops. Mercury, which hold on, let's see, there we go. Mercury ingressing into Scorpio. Now that's going to take place on the 30th of September at about 4:44 Pacific time. Now, when we look at the lay of the land here, Scorpio or Mercury is going to be, let me talk about that first. Mercury is going to be in Scorpio from the Oh yeah, because I think it's going to be in Scorpio pretty much the whole time. Yeah, for a long time. So Mercury is going to be in Scorpio from the 30th of September until the 6th of December. So Mercury's got a good what 3-4 months of Scorpio time. So this would be one where look to see where you have again Scorpio in your configured in your placements, and if you have any time lords. If Mercury is a time lord, or if you have any planets that are in those solid signs, that's Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo. Now, yeah, because Mercury is going to be there for a minute. And especially note too is and for all of those instances when Mercury is stationed retrograde, you want to keep those retrograde periods are very notable periods of times too when they're activated. So yeah, keep an eye on that one. Now the when we look at the lay of the land in a more kind of mundane sense, this is an interesting one for Mercury, just because on a mixed bag note, let's start with that. It's being overcome by both Jupiter and Mars, who are both in this sort of like diminished state. Jupiter's bringing okay abundance and things, and Mars is only causing a little bit of trouble. So and then it's co-present with Venus, which is nice. It's got from out from under the beams of the sun. That actually will be another period to watch while Mercury's under the beams of the sun. Those mercurial topics, while it's within that 15-degree range of the sun, while it's in Virgo, Mercury was fine, but once it gets there in Libra, that's when those Mercury topics may even those two will be a bit questionable, where it be even more hampered. So just some things to tune into their communication, trust, things along those lines, legal matters and customs and things like that. Now, I like that it's co-present with Venus, so it's got more beneficence going forward than not. Again, just a little bit of maybe some subtle things with Mars. This would be like, imagine your landlord. Sometimes they may throw in surprise visits or whatever, but overall things are okay. We have an okay relationship. So that's what I would say for that. And even looking at, I think these Mercury topics are getting a bit of a break after going through that kind of that tough time in Libra, because now that Mars is out of Cancer, it's now in the space, especially too going through the degrees of the benefics and in the terms of the bounds. That's even a bit nice, that we're getting a bit of a relief. Again, I don't think it's completely erasing all of the martial things, but again, at least it's a little bit of a break, which anyone will I think will take a break from Mars. So I do like that for the Mercury topics. I like how the outcome for them overall, things maybe not, maybe seeming, unsure at first, but maybe not going as bad as we expect them to, which is always a good, or maybe we'll see how that things kind of maybe affect in the long term, but I would say, this would be a time to just, I think just in general, just to be just kind of more just aware of what's kind of going on around, and not just in the, again, not just in just like the news, but what's going on in one's neighborhood, what's going on in one's just kind of friend group, what's going on with the family and things along those lines. Does that make sense? Let me actually go ahead and switch over because I think I'm done with all of that. But yeah, that's pretty much the time of Mercury in Scorpio. But yeah, this is, as you see, it's an interesting month. We're in some tricky times, you know, and this is, and again, this may not be entirely bad for you. You know, it's different for everyone. I've been my there's some stuff in my charts, and then some people around me that have been really kind of active that I've been observing. But then you got other people who are having really solid times. You know, I got a friend who's just celebrated their son's birthday, and then, you know, just little things like that. So it really depends on what's going on in your chart. So really let that always ground you, you know, first and foremost, like what's going on within my environment, and then branch out. You know, then go from there. Like, ooh, siblings seems like a tricky spot, like I said, or maybe friends seem like a tricky spot. Let me check in with them. Or maybe there's something going on with, if you're married, maybe there's something going on with my spouse, my partner. Let me see what's happening there. Or maybe there's something going on. Maybe you're having, you know, maybe a fourth house theme. You know, maybe there's something with the home or with the parents, or maybe even your own sort of faith. You know, any sort of things like that. So that's those just some ways to navigate these periods of time so that they don't have to seem so overwhelming, you know, and that you can get. I think that with astrology is not meant to be where, okay, if harsh times are coming, that doesn't mean to just hide. It's just, okay, well, if there are going to be areas, troubles in these areas, what can I do about them? How can I be of assistance to the sibling, to the spouse, to the friend, to my employees, to myself? You know, what does that look like? You know, how can we mitigate those things? So, and then help work through those things and get assistance for those things, you know, and whatever that looks like. So just some last things to kind of think about there. But yeah, that's the month, and it is very busy, you know. So again, like I said, if you got cardinal placements, that is a tough one, you know, especially while Mars is in Cancer. But know that there is going to be a bit of relief from that once it enters into Leo. Those of you with Leo placements, and like I said, the fixed placements, that means we're going to catch that. We're going to catch that, and we're going to catch that Martial stuff. So you get eye on topics, you know, make sure to take care. For example, like I got Leo rising, so I'm gonna make sure to get as much rest. I got teas I'm drinking, make sure eating good foods, all that good stuff, getting movement with the body, and again, just being just aware of how I'm moving around. So, but yeah, leave in the comment section how things show up for you throughout the month. And if you have any questions, leave things. I have, like I said, playlists for this stuff. My email's down there if you have any questions about the service that I provide. And yeah, there's my Patreon, and yeah, that's pretty much all the good stuff here. So, but until next time, until next time, good luck out there, and fill your time wisely. And I will catch you on the next one. Later. You know what? If you happen to stay to the end, I'm recording on a new software. I'll just leave this in since I was like, oh, I didn't do that as flawless as I would like. I'm recording on a new software here, which is going to change the game up for me. But yeah, this wasn't a bad first flow. A lot of new things that I'm unveiling. I had the clips happen in my first place. So, but yeah, just a little behind the scenes there. But all right, I'll see you later for real.